Bearwalker by Joseph Bruchak. Chapter 22. Help. I stare up in disbelief at the bloodied face of the man who leans on me as he holds my arm. "Sekon, aswasosis," he says. "Hello, little bear. What be you doing here?" Then his legs start to buckle. I step forward and put my arm around his waist, helping him to sit back down and lean against the smooth trunk of an old dead cedar. He's lost his hat somewhere. There's just a kerchief around his head. It was red already, but it's a darker red now from the blood that has matted his thick white hair. Mr. Osgood lifts his hand to gesture at his head. "Scalp wounds do bleed some," he says. "Looks worse than it is." He slaps his leg. "It's the knee that has put a hitch in my get-along. Got tore up when a tree fell on it when I was a sprat. Rolling down that cliff didn't help it none." Mr. Osgood looks me over as I kneel there beside him. "It appears to me you've had a mighty rough handling yourself, son." I fill him in as quickly as I can about the events at Camp Chuckamuck and my escape, my encounter with the bears, and how close I came to being caught by you-know-who. Mr. Osgood chuckles. "And here I thought being cut and falling down the mountain earned me the medal for having the worst day. You have me trumped, lad. I believe you need this more'n I do." He unbuttons the pocket of his khaki shirt and pulls out a big, carob-coated protein bar. "I always carry a few of these when I head out on a hike," he says, as I tear off the wrapper with my teeth and then try to control myself from just wolfing it down and making myself sick. With each bite, I can feel my energy returning. It's probably as much from realizing I'm not alone out here as it is from the food. While I eat, Mr. Osgood gives me a quick rundown of what has happened to him. Mr. Mac, Cal, and Marlin had laid an ambush for him on the trail, but he'd gotten wind of it. "Even those that think themselves country boys," he chuckled, "have a hard time sitting still and keeping quiet in the woods." He had quietly circled around them and reached the place where Matilda, his four-wheeler, was stored. That was when he had two unpleasant surprises. The first was seeing that Matilda's wires had been pulled. The second was when he was rushed by the big man who had been lying in wait behind the shed where Matilda was stored. "I may not be as young as I was," Mr. Osgood said, "but even an old woodchuck knows how to duck." The first knife slash had only cut his scalp. He'd been able to bring up his .22 and get off a shot. Hit him right in the chest, but he just stopped for a moment. Then he grinned at me, said something about how bullets couldn't kill him, and started walking at me slow. Mr. Osgood shook his head. Hearing that made me decide to see how a rifle butt would suit him. While he was clearing his head from having Betsy slammed up against the side of his skull, I hightailed it for the high country. But even though Mr. Osgood knew the woods and trails better than anyone, the one who called himself Walker Whitebear had managed to catch up to him where the trail went above a steep drop-off. So I shucked my pack and my jacket and took a dive, figuring I'd just slide down the rock face, Mr. Osgood says, with a wry shake of his head. But I figured wrong. 20 years ago I could have managed fine, but this stiff leg of mine played me false. Caught my heel and started to tumble. Wasn't that hard to lay limp like all my bones was broke when I hit the bottom. It's a ways down into that gully, so I suppose that is why he just left me for dead. "I'm glad you're alive," I say. I suppose it's a silly thing to say, but it makes Mr. Osgood smile. "Why, thank you, son. I guess that means we two are in total agreement. But what are you doing up here?" I've forgotten to tell him about the phone. "Trying to make it to the bear seat." I pull the cell phone out of my pocket, open it, and press the button. This time, nothing happens at all. It has gone totally dead. What little hope I'd been feeling dies. "Don't look so sad. I've got me a backup," Mr. Osgood says, handing me a second cell phone that is an exact twin to the one I'm holding. "It's all set to go," he says. She'd tan my hide if she heard me say it. But Mrs. Osgood is a mite more forgetful than me when it comes to keeping her cell phone charged. I take the cell phone and follow Mr. Osgood's direction. There's only one way up to the bear seat, where he'd been heading at a crawl to make the call I'm now determined to complete. I'm going alone because it's too much of a scramble for him now with his hurt knee. He's staying hidden near the branch in the trail to keep watch. My feet feel sure and confident as I climb. It's almost as if I'm flying as I go up the trail and scale the steep cliffside that leads to my objective. I'm not even breathing hard when I reach the spot. It's easy to recognize, not just because it's a slab of rock that is flat as a bench and gives the widest view I've yet seen off the side of this mountain. Someone, who knows how long ago, has carved into the stone the rough outline of a sitting bear. I'm dialing the phone. The call goes through. I'm talking to the 911 operator. It's almost as if I'm in a dream now. I'm not even sure what I'm saying, but I must be making sense because the operator asks me first one question and then another as I answer her. My voice is calm. I think that helps convince her I'm telling the truth. Another voice comes on the line. "Young man," it says, "this is the sheriff." I tell him about Mr. Mack and the others holding the students and teachers at gunpoint in the main cabin at Camp Chuckamuck, and how I got away and climbed up here on the mountain to make my call for help. "Son," the sheriff says, "just sit tight. We're sending help." I sit there for a moment after closing the phone and putting it into my pocket. A red-tailed hawk is circling right there in front of me, and the sun feels warm on my face. It's going to be all right. Help is on the way. Suddenly, the hawk gives a loud whistle, folds its wings, and dives out of sight. I shake myself. It's not over yet. I have to go back and tell Mr. Osgood that I've gotten through, and then help him get back down the trail. But when I reach the trailhead, he's not there. He'd been hiding under this fallen cedar. He said he'd wait for me. This doesn't make any sense. All of the elation I'd been feeling is gone now, replaced with a sense of foreboding. This isn't good. Calm down, Baron, I tell myself. Think. Do you have the wrong place? I look around, trying to shake the confusion that has settled over me like a thick cloud. There are the 2 trail markers, right where I saw them before, nailed head high onto the pine tree a few yards away. But there is something different. I see something resting on the bare rock of the trail just past that pine. It's red. I walk over and bend to pick it up with numb fingers. It's a kerchief stained with blood.